j'arrive, j'ouvre, hold my edge, vywocha.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Ocast, your island gateway to all things geek. I'm your host tonight, Carl McDonald, and my esteemed team tonight rejoining us. Kieran, what's happening with you?
All right. Not much, just not long back in from doing teaching or assisting teaching the boxing class, so I'm still in my boxing hoodie.
And like I said, at our first tonight, you're seeing Founge on the screen, and there's no languages, and there's no Gaelic about. So what's all this about, Founge?
Well, I grew up with Japanese animation as a kid, so I'm one to talk about tonight's topic for sure.
Okay, with that, I'll let you take the reins now.
Well, thank you, Carl. And tonight we're really delighted to be welcoming Dr. Reina Denison, who is a professor in film and digital arts at the University of Bristol, and with one of the coolest specialty ever. If I had known I could have done a PhD about that, I would have. That is around Japanese animation. And more specifically tonight, we'll talk about the Studio Ghibli, or you were telling us Ghibli, there is a bit of a story behind the name, isn't there?
Yes. There is indeed, yes. Stories differ. Some people think it's named after a warm wind that blows off the Sahara Desert. Others think it's named after an Italian fighter plane. And in the mix of all of that, Toshio Suzuki, the producer at Ghibli, tells a wonderful story about how Miyazaki didn't know how to pronounce it. And by the time they worked out it should have been Ghibli rather than Ghibli, it was too late. And so the Japanese name is Ghibli, but it maybe should have been the Italian Ghibli.
All right. Well, I mean, the influence of Italian culture on Miyazaki is quite strong. We'll get to talk a bit more about that, but first tell us a bit about yourself. Then it's quite an exciting job you have, I dare say. How did you get there? How did you end up teaching about animation in Bristol?
A long and winding path. I studied Japanese at the University of Oxford as an undergraduate, but I'd grown up in America watching Saturday morning cartoons, which, unbeknownst to me when I was a child, were laced with anime. Anime was everywhere in Saturday morning cartoons. So I grew up watching things like Battle of the Planets and G-Force, depending on your country, Gatchaman in Japanese, and loved them. Absolutely fell in love with anime as a child. And kind of then as I started to learn Japanese as an undergrad, came back to it and realized how vibrant an animation economy there still was, but also just generally fell in love with Japanese cinema from Kurosawa and Ozu through to Miyazaki in the contemporary period. So it was a wonderful time to be studying cinema because Japan was really on a rise, coming back through people like Takeshi Kitano and Hayao Miyazaki to the big international festival circuits. So there was lots of Japanese cinema to watch in the 90s and 2000s. And it's been a joy ever since, frankly. And I do feel very lucky to have the job I have and to be allowed to spend my time studying Studio Ghibli and other Japanese animation. Today, I'm trying to finish a piece on Makoto Shinkai's disaster trilogy, Your Name, Suzume, and Weathering with You. So it's a big world, is Japanese animation.
Indeed, and it's certainly undergoing these days it seems to be exploding internationally, and platforms like Netflix are really putting a lot of effort in offering a lot of things out there. Can you tell us a bit more about your jobs and what do you teach and a bit about where you're working? It will sound like an advertisement for the University of Bristol, but why not after all?
Yes. So I came to Bristol 4 years ago now and was head of department until last summer. And now I'm kind of free to go back to research, which is wonderful. So I've spent the last year getting back into research, and I teach film festivals. And I spent today assigning dissertations for supervision. So I do the dissertation unit as well at the moment. And honestly, anytime I get to spend in the classroom is just a joy. Students have the best ideas, and always, if you can coax out the joy they have for cinema, for film and TV of any kind, you just see people so passionate and coming alive with their subject. And it's so great to see.
What did you write your own dissertation on, might I ask?
Mononoke Hime, of course. Princess Mononoke.
Any specific focus you had?
3 years just talking about one film. It was a really important landmark movie for Ghibli because, of course, it's the first one of their movies that broke all the local box office records. It did really well. People were queuing round city blocks to watch Princess Mononoke when it first came out. And so I was in Japan at the time and was seeing this unfold and was just so intrigued by why people were so into this eco-fable. It seemed like such a strange thing. And then as I got into studying it more, obviously, I found out so much more about how pivotal it was. You know, it's the first kind of establishment of CGI in Studio Ghibli films. They'd done little dabbling like attempts to do CGI before, but they had to actually really invest in it for Princess Mononoke. And then, of course, it's one of the first Ghibli movies to go to America through the Disney Ghibli deal. And oh my God, that cast in America was for anime unheard of at the time. You know, have Gillian Anderson and Claire Danes doing voices for that movie was amazing. And then finding out more about what happened to it when it was released by Disney Miramax on behalf of Disney in the States was fascinating again, because people were driving 6 hours to watch the film because that was the closest place to them that it was showing. So all of this was just fascinating to me, and I couldn't, I kind of kept thinking I would do the whole of Ghibli, but kept coming back to Princess Mononoke over and over again. And 80,000 words later, had a dissertation. So that was really joyous. And from there, I've kind of broadened out. I have a deep love of animation from all over the world, and also for popular genre cinema, because that's the kind of cinema from other countries that doesn't tend to get talked about very much. So, most of your listeners, I'm sure, will have heard of people like Kurosawa, but probably not but probably not more contemporary Japanese directors. So it's great to be doing work on women directors and people from Japan that other scholars maybe don't have time to work on, or other audiences might not get to see quite so often.
I think it's really interesting. I do remember Mononoke quite a bit when it came out I grew up in a French country, so it came out. I remember my mother saying, "Oh, let's go see it." And I was a little boy, so all I thought was, princess, probably not going to be for me. At the end of the film, all I wanted to do was go back, see it. And I was already a fan of Porco Rosso. I just hadn't understood it was the same people making it. So I have that memory engraved in my mind for sure. I can understand that it caught your attention very specifically. You've written since more research on it. I think you've published articles as well as your PhD, haven't you?
Yeah. I never published the PhD, but I've published about half of it in articles. And I did an edited collection with other scholars all about Princess Mononoke, I think for its 20th anniversary.
You've kind of touched about like what kind of led you into studying Japanese animation, researching it, and then of course doing dissertations on it. What was it about Ghibli that kind of drew you to use the studio as your main sort of resource and your main study field?
Yeah, so I started off writing a book just about anime and anime history. And then within that wrote one chapter on Ghibli. And as I was writing that chapter, I kept having to cut it because there was so much more to say. And Ghibli is genuinely a gift that keeps on giving. The more I find out about it, the more it is often the exception to every rule of anime. Like, do they even make anime at Ghibli? Or is it manga eigo, or like cartoon films back in the full animation toy animation style? Everything about anime and Ghibli creates friction and difference and tension that is wonderful to study. It's just great for an academic because it's always exceptional and it's always the exception.
Nice. So you mentioned how you kind of like you've already talked about how the pronunciation of Ghibli came about. So another story I'll probably ask you if you're aware of it. I won't be surprised if you do, if you are. But do you know about the time where one of Miyazaki's, I think one of his directors or one of his publishers, someone who works under him anyway, had sent a katana to Disney or one of the American publishers on the basis of, no, we're not going to be editing our films by your standards, sort of thing.
Do you want me to do the long version of the story?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think we've got a decent amount of time, hopefully.
Okay. So the story goes, before the Disney Tokuma deal, which was actually between Buena Vista International and Tokuma Shoten, the publishing company that owned Ghibli at the time. Before that deal, they actually released a couple of the Ghibli films in America, or in North America. One, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, was known as Warriors of the Wind, and they cut about almost an hour out of it, I think, if I'm remembering right. And it bears very little resemblance to, the wonderful female-centered eco story that, that was making a point about nuclear power and destruction that Miyazaki was trying to say within the film. And so, yes, it's not clear who it was. Steve Alpert tells this story in his book about Ghibli, where he was in the international department at Tokuma working with Ghibli. There was originally the story that it was Miyazaki that sent a katana. It doesn't seem to be Miyazaki. It seems to have maybe been Suzuki or someone else in that department doing a marketing stunt. But yes, they sent a katana they somehow got a katana to one Harvey Weinstein at Miramax. And they had a note attached to it that just said, no cuts. And so, yeah, it's a real story, apparently. Where the idea came from, it's not entirely clear. There's different versions of it out there. But I love the idea that Miyazaki was so fed up with people taking his work and doing things with it that he was really insistent on how the films were translated and how they changed the soundtracks as well, because apparently Disney wanted to Americanize the whole soundtrack, change the music, re-edit the music together so that there were, kind of more heightened emotional moments in the films. And he was just like, no cuts, no changes. And so they were having to run the whole scripting process back through Ghibli over and over again, which was one of the things Steve Alpert was doing for them.
That's really risky, because I've heard that story before, but I didn't know like the details of that. I knew it was obviously could have been Suzuki, and obviously I forgot it was Harvey Weinstein that received said katana, which was just like. But of course, I knew about the editing done to Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
Mm.
Or did you, was it pronounced Nausicaa, or is it? So now it's a slight different pronunciation for it.
No. I mean, maybe Fonch can help us, because this is one where it's coming from Norse.
Yeah.
Through
Scandinavia. Norse? Okay, that makes sense. They do tend to use a lot of sort of sounds for S's. It's also how that influences Scots Gaelic, but that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, okay.
In Japanese, it's probably very different. It's Nausicaa. Nausicaa.
I might refer to that from here on. But yeah, when you mentioned about how it wasn't just the scripting that would have been affected and edited, but the soundtrack, okay, that was new to me. And the first thought in my head was, I've not seen every single Ghibli film, but as the first example that comes to mind, like one that would probably arguably be affected most by that editing would maybe be Grave of the Fireflies, because I imagine that has quite the soundtrack to it already. It's one I'm kind of hesitant to see, to be fair, but
yeah, Grave wasn't part of the Disney Tokuma deal.
Was it not? Okay, that's good.
No, because it's I forget who the publisher. It's owned by another publisher in Japan, so they had to make a separate deal for that one, and that's why it comes over later.
Okay, because I know that was Grave of the Fireflies is quite very personal to Hayao Miyazaki, because that was his own personal experience growing up.
So it's directed by his senpai, his elder statesman, kind of big brother at the company, Isao Takahata. But Miyazaki was, I think, one of the producers. Oh, am I getting that right? No, I'm not. He produces others of the films. But yeah, it's really important to both of them. I think it was released in cinemas in Japan at the same time as My Neighbor Totoro as a double bill. So that's a double bill that would have been fun to watch. And apparently people were so unsure about it at the time that they let the cinema owners choose which one to show first, so they could have audiences leaving in tears or leaving with happy smiles. So I think you can probably guess which way they went.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But But those two films are like mirror images, right? Grave of the Fireflies is this socio-realist, really personal film in which, you're right, Isao Takahata does reflect on and add to the original story with his own personal experiences of war.
Yeah, because I think with everything else that Ghibli and Miyazaki and of course his senpai have produced, Princess Mononoke, My Neighbor Totoro, The Cat Returns, etc., even though they have these serious messages that they want to try and influence the current generations, like, shouldn't be developing nuclear war and look after our environment, look after wildlife, but they always has a happy sort of family-friendly tone. There's always some lightheartedness. For example, Ponyo, another one that I've seen clips of, not seen fully, but that's another nice little happy, jolly, romantic one. But from what I understand, great respect for the ocean. And then, of course, you're hit by Grave of the Fireflies.
The most devastating animated film ever made, yes. Or at least in the top 10 of them, for sure. There's some pretty devastating animated films out there.
Indeed. You kind of touched upon it. It's quite interesting talking about Ghibli and how special it is in many ways. Its influence on, well, in many ways on Western society, right? It's still, every time it comes out, we have their big, it's the next Ghibli, go see it. The master has come out again to make one last film before he retires for good this time. And I
mean, how many times is he going to retire?
As many times as it gets, it needs, but
I thought my career on Ghibli was done with Princess Mononoke because he retired after that one.
That was a long time ago.
And yes, nearly 20 years later, he's still making films?
Hi.
Hang on, I can't do maths. That would be, yeah.
You're a bit too.
Well over 20 years later.
And yeah, what I was wondering, because this influence on us definitely in Western culture is big. How is it? Could you tell us a bit? How is it in Japan? Because we perceive Ghibli as so uniquely special. Do they have the same kind of reputation back home?
Yes. So as I said, I was just working on a piece by Makoto Shinkai, who directed Your Name. And in one of the interviews he does that I've just read, he's talking about how influential Ghibli was on him. So yes, there's a whole generation of directors coming through who've either worked at Ghibli or were influenced by Ghibli. And so, yes, it's massively important just to the industry, but also at the height of their power across the 2000s, the press would report on the Ghibli effect. Anytime a Ghibli movie would come out, the box office takings for Japanese cinema would go up by a significant percentage point for the whole year. They would have a massive impact on film going and film viewing. And I think they laid the foundation for what we're seeing now. As animated films come out in Japan, they're doing much, much better than they used to. So something like Your Name breaking box office records, or Infinity Castle from the Demon Slayer series, which has just come out and broken all records again. Like this kind of animated film hit phenomenon was really created by Studio Ghibli and by Hayao Miyazaki at Ghibli. Though there's always been a tension at Studio Ghibli between art and commerce. So I think both Miyazaki and Takahata would talk about themselves and see themselves as animation artists or as being in the world of animation art. It's just Suzuki made them incredibly popular.
Hi.
But yeah, those movies made... I haven't got the data in front of me, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think you're talking over $100 million for Princess Mononoke, and then nearer 200 for Spirited Away at the local box office in Japan. These are massively popular films.
So the big question that what's so special about Ghibli? There is so much art. Anime obviously so rich. There's so much outside of Ghibli, which is uniquely beautiful. What's special about them?
Very good question. They've always made films that don't look like the rest of anime. And they're often for whole family audiences in a way anime often isn't. Anime is often made for boys or for girls or for adults, but Ghibli films are made for everyone. So they can really appeal to a widespread audience and get a lot of people through the door for that reason. I think the universal themes don't hurt, but also just the lushness of the animation. These films look better than other films of their times often, because they have bigger budgets, they have a house style that people know and love already. So one of the great things about Ghibli is that they don't just hire people project by project. They've had, over the height of their power, a stable roster of people working for them. And that means you can create things together over time and get really good at it. You know, everybody is right at the top of their game. So yeah, beautiful films.
Post World War One Italy, and everybody's Italian, and there is a rise of fascism. But even those that are more fantasy, set in other worlds, you can see this influence of Art Nouveau and Art Deco and 19th century, a bit of steampunk here and there. Can you tell us more a bit about this communication of culture within Ghibli, which is both extremely Japanese and has this kind of traveling touch to it in many ways?
So a lot of Miyazaki's films in particular are actually adaptations of literature that's in translation in Japan from European authors. So Diana Wynne Jones, of course, and so things like Howl's Moving Castle are famously from authors, and Tales from Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. I think she's American. But anyway, yes, so European Anglophone literature. So one of the stories is that Miyazaki was in his literature club, his children's literature club at university, and and got into reading children's literature while he was at university, and so is really well read around fantasy literature from around the world. He's quite influenced by Russian fairy tales as well as European stories. So often what we get in Ghibli's European films are kind of fantasy-scapes of European past, and very specific. So even something like Castle in the Sky is based on imagery that Miyazaki sketched on a trip in Thatcher's to the UK, where he went and toured disused mines and went to the pub a lot in Wales. So there's a great story in one of the books about Ghibli about his poor interpreter who was going around with Wales with him, and he wanted to show him obviously all the castles and the things that you would normally see if you were a tourist in Wales, and he was saying, no, I would like to go to the coal mines. So there were these great images in Castle in the Sky even of kind of nature starting to take back the industrial landscape, and those come direct from Wales. But you see that imagery again in things like Howl's Moving Castle in the backgrounds, in some of the architecture there, as well as there being architecture in that movie from, I think, Alsace-Lorraine, that kind of area. And of course, with Porco and Kiki and others, there's other European landscapes in there as well, French and Italian, of course. And this is possible because Ghibli's a fairly well-off company, so they would send their animators to those countries to do architectural surveys and get photographs and do sketches of buildings and light and scenery from the real European locations. So even Ghibli's fantasies are based in our world.
Fascinating. It's while we're talking about Miyazaki, and I'll give you a chance, Kiran, to ask something else. I'm just, while we're on him specifically, he's obviously a big star and has been for quite a while in Ghibli. Would Ghibli, it's a stupid question, but I'm interested in your answer. Would Ghibli be the same without him?
There would be no Ghibli without him. Ghibli was founded in 1985, and as Suzuki tells it, it was founded specifically to make films by Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata. Given the sale of Ghibli to Nippon Television, I think it was last year or the year before, I am deeply suspicious that when and if Miyazaki ever stops making films, the studio may go into a heritage mode or a library mode where NTV will be responsible for the licensing thereafter, but there won't necessarily maybe be more films to come. Unless, of course, they can convince one of the old school that have left Ghibli now to come back and become its main director. But honestly, I think a bit like with Mushi Pro, which was Osamu Tezuka's company that he made Astro Boy with and a bunch of other great programs and films. When he died, it also went into kind of this kind of heritage mode where It was more about just keeping those things in circulation and on the air and in cinemas from time to time, rather than trying to produce new works, occasionally licensing them to other things. And that's been fascinating in recent years. As Miyazaki's been slowing down, the number of theatrical productions globally have been going up.
You don't see any rising stars and any new potential name.
Well, there were, with people like Hiromasa Yonebayashi or Yoshiyuki Momose. Ghibli had some of these rising stars, but then they kind of shuttered the company in 2014 briefly, and a lot of those rising stars left at that time and went to form Studio Ponno, where they're now working together and doing other projects. Rising stars like Masashi Ando, who joined them. When did he join? He worked on Mononoke and Spirited Away. Then I think he had a falling out with Miyazaki. And then he came back for Princess Kaguya, which is Isao Takahata's last film. But he's an amazing animator, and he's been working all over the place. So he worked with Satoshi Kon, and he did the character animation work for Your Name by Makoto Shinkai. So there are these rising stars, but they're not necessarily working at Ghibli anymore, sadly. It's been a problem for Ghibli. They went through a period of trying to find a replacement or a successor, and it just they never quite did as well as Miyazaki.
Okay. So you mentioned Tales of Earthsea there.
Yeah.
So I got two questions that came to mind. So you mentioned it was originally created by an author. Who was the author?
Ursula Le Guin.
So I take it, do you know of the tension that was caused between Hayao Miyazaki and his son regarding said film, which is regarded not Ghibli?
It's not regarded highly,
That's it?
for sure, within the Ghibli oeuvre, that's for sure. So I am fascinated by this feud between the father and son. So if you watch the behind the scenes documentaries, and Robin, I will talk about Ghibli food as
That's my
much as you
sister.
want me to talk about Ghibli food. But yeah, just to answer your question briefly, this feud is fascinating. This feud is included in Suzuki's opening note in the cinematic brochure that they sold on release in cinemas of Tales from Earthsea, which suggests to me it's a publicity stunt, or at least partially a publicity stunt. But if you watch the behind-the-scenes making of, it's clear Miyazaki Sr. is not particularly happy about his son being given the role of director. Previously, Goro Miyazaki had been working at the Ghibli Museum in Mitaka, so wasn't really doing things in relation to animation. But the story the story that Suzuki was selling was this idea that Goro had grown up immersed in the world of Miyazaki, Hayao. His dad was this amazing director. Goro had grown up around his drawing, his artistry, his abilities were passed on to him somehow. So there were two sides to that story. I feel like it was a lot to ask of someone who'd never directed a film before. Earthsea is a very complicated series of books. And they tried to pick a part of it from about the middle of the third book to do, which is a hard thing to do, to build a world around a film that is less than 2 hours long in a world that deep and that complicated. It's almost impossible. So I kind of feel for him. He had a really hard task ahead of him, did Goro Miyazaki, trying to do that. And yeah, it didn't go particularly well. I kind of myself felt like I was really enjoying the film, but it needed to be about another 3 hours long.
I did not know that at all. That was originally, created as as a book series prior. I knew bits and pieces, like for example, what caused the rivalry, and well, not the rivalry, but the tension. And I think it was also, I imagine like script work also comes into it as well.
Yeah,
And the fact,
yeah.
the fact that he mentions it's just basically taken from the middle of the series. It's just like, okay, no, you don't do that. You just don't start from the middle.
I mean, but they worked together. Hayao Miyazaki did a script for Up on Poppy Hill from a manga and then gave it to Goro to direct. So they did work together after that. sort of, kind of. you know. And again, that film, though it is lovely, doesn't translate very well across cultures. There's some rough edges to it because at certain points there's in the storytelling there's the danger of incest between two of the characters, but then don't worry everyone, it turns out to be fine if you haven't seen it. Spoiler alert, but it's fine. But if you wouldn't mind me answering Robin's question.
Yes, please
really
tell us
like
about
to.
food.
So when I went to the Ghibli Park in a little while ago, they had the special exhibition about Ghibli food in it, and I've never spent longer in a museum in my life. It was great. You got to walk through kind of the scenery where the tables were set with the food, and they had the drawings around the outside. It was just great. It's so hard to pick a favorite. I mean, I have ugly favorites and pretty favorites in the Ghibli food. Obviously, I love Ponyo and the way Ponyo discovers ramen and ham for the first time. It's adorable. And if anyone here has children and has ever seen a child eat, you know exactly the joy I'm talking about of a child discovering their favorite food. It's beautifully animated. But I think my ugly favorite is probably the scene where they're making food in Princess Mononoke, and you have a monk who's over the cooking pot, and it's just wonderful to watch it sizzling and bubbling. It's just great. Yeah. But yeah. So ugly favorites and beautiful favorites. I should probably also, special mention to Howl for, the eggs and calcifer. By the way, if you ever go to Japan, you can buy a spatula version of calcifer, the fire demon, that you can make your own eggs with and then feed him the shells afterwards. Ghibli, Suzuki's great. He never misses a trick. But yeah, food in Ghibli is a whole cultural thing. I have a whole catalogue from that exhibition that I absolutely love. And at some point, I would love to write something about Ghibli food because there's... Sorry, I'm going on a bit.
No, that's why we invited you.
There's the joy of animated food, and anyone who's been watching things like Food Wars, Delicious in Dungeon. I mean, there's so many of them that are hit shows now that are all about food and gourmet food. Anyone who watches it will know that the joy of animating food is that food can be kind of spectacularized in anime in a way that's harder to do in live action. No matter how good food looks on the screen, it doesn't look as good as kind of the idealized, beautified, aestheticized version of food that you'll find in anime, I think, which is just glorious.
There's like this sneaky shine to the animation when it just shows. It's just like, that doesn't matter where else is going on. It's like food. I want that. And at first it comes into mind for me, it's just on a comparison level. I mean, Ghibli has its own unique way of doing it, and food in anime is just like you mentioned, Delicious in Dungeon. They just have a spectacular way, but I think Ghibli and Delicious in Dungeon kind of stand out the most because of maybe how they do it. Maybe it's the color tones. And the first scene that came to mind when discussing food there was this. You probably know the scene just by me not even need to mention it all that much. Is the opening scene to Spirited Away? Well, not opening scene, but when the parents go to the
to the market.
Yeah. Just seeing all that bubbly stuff, and even I'm not a huge fan of seafood, but seeing like especially like crustaceans, like crabs, but seeing like crabs' legs and lobsters' legs, like I kind of want that.
Yeah, I think I remember reading as well that it's not Japanese food that they're eating.
Yeah,
I think it might be Asian food of a different kind in that scene. So it's spectacularized food even for the Japanese viewing audience. It's not domestic food, it's foreign, I would also say one of my favorite other food anime is Isekai Izakaya, which was made for NHK, which is like the BBC of Japan. So they had this whole story about an izakaya, like a bar with food, where the back door opens on contemporary Japan, but the front door opens onto a fantasy medieval world where beer is new. And it's very exciting. Lager, particularly, is new and very exciting. But the food in that is gorgeous to look at. But the thing they did at the end of it, because it's the BBC and they have to do something educational, is that they have cookery classes at the end of it to make the food from the show. So that's another fun one.
It's really awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm due my dinner at some point after this, so that's just not helping.
We should probably stop talking about food.
And my sister, on the other hand, she's the one who asked the question, she's just saying the conversation is making her noodles taste better. My follow-up question, I was able to stay on track and remember it. Yeah. So you mentioned Astro Boy and its creator. So my little question is, have you heard of Naoki Urasawa?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Have you watched Pluto?
I haven't yet. Sorry. I haven't yet. I did some work on some of his. Well, one of the things of his that I've been reading lately is Asadora, which has been coming out in manga form, which is just wonderful. Kind of features Godzilla-like monsters, but has this really great female pilot central character who's really young. So it's really very interesting. And it's named for the Asadorama, so the morning dramas that women used to watch. So it's just fantastic. Anyway, he's such an interesting writer, though, the way he mixes and matches genres and takes aspects of 20th century Japanese history and just kind of puts them in a melting pot and does amazing things with them. I love his work. So, no, I haven't seen Pluto yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Have you watched it?
Yes. My wife and I,
What did you think?
watched. It was amazing. And like, I was talking with my mate Matthew about it and where it actually what world and universe it connects to. It's like, okay, that's actually awesome. And it's like, now Urasawa's art style has always fascinated me in general. I was introduced to Urasawa through Monster.
Yeah, which is great.
So, and I think, would you say that Urasawa was also influenced by Miyazaki?
I don't know if he is directly. I just don't know if he is influenced by Miyazaki directly, but it would be hard for him not to have imbibed some of the Ghibli style over the years, just because Urasawa is just the consummate genre mixer in Japan. He's so knowledgeable about the whole of Japanese pop culture. I find it hard to believe he isn't, in some way, at least. Either maybe he rejects Miyazaki as the too dominant a force, but I mean, he's just a great filmmaker and writer and artist. So the way I came across him was 20th Century Boys, which was made into a trilogy of live action movies. So from his manga, so that's just amazing as well.
Monster was my wife's first introduction to anime because she wasn't into it at the time, and I went, Monster. She loves psychological thrillers as well, so it worked out.
Well, that'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I still need to get her educated on Ghibli. She's seen a few Ghibli stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, I say Ghibli is making films for as wide a possible an audience. But I think if you're someone who doesn't like family movies, then try something like Princess Mononoke.
Oh, yeah.
Or Porco Rosso or Grave of the Fireflies. There are very, very much more adult-oriented films in the mix of Studio Ghibli.
So another one that comes to mind with the mention of, again, Astro Boy's creator. I take it, are you aware of the dynamic between the two and how Miyazaki and Astro Boy's creator are like almost like polar opposites? Almost you get the memes from like Miyazaki and Junji Ito. But I know the creator of Astro Boy and Miyazaki share similar experiences, but their worldview is slightly different.
So when Miyazaki was coming up through the anime system at Toei Animation in the mid-1960s, it was after a period where he'd been thinking he might try animation. And one of the things he'd been doing was copying Tezuka's style of animation or style of drawing. And he had to kind of stop. He had to stop himself doing that to develop his own style. So there is a reference there for Tezuka from Miyazaki, but I think also a recognition that you couldn't out Tezuka, you couldn't copy Tezuka, you had to develop your own sensibilities as a filmmaker, or you would never get anywhere. I don't know if there was an overt rivalry there, but I think because Tezuka comes slightly earlier, by 1963, when Miyazaki is starting at Toei, Tezuka is starting to animate Astro Boy. So he's doing basically TV animation in Japan and setting his stall out as the the kind of template for how you do television animation affordably in Japan. Whereas Miyazaki at the same time is basically joining a company that wants to think of itself like Disney, that's producing kind of a film a year or so. And so their starting points in the industry are just very different. But yeah, they all influence each other. It's hard
Yeah.
not to.
I mean, it's great. So it's always, since then, it's been a growing sort of genre. So it's very easy to kind of like find influences from one group to another. And even like modern artists will probably be doing that as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's my sort of questions come to fruition, I guess. So I'll probably pass the torch back to either Font or Cal.
One thing I was thinking of as you were talking, and you mentioned several times the presence of very complex and interesting female leads in several of these films, especially in Ghibli. Japanese society, like our society, is still struggling with internalized sexism and sex gender system.
Yeah.
And to an extent, they're struggling with different things we are in terms of gender roles. Yet, anime, and Ghibli specifically, but you see it in other animes, kind of can present these very strong, complex female characters. You will see some animes in which the female characters are very stereotyped. They're always needing saving, they're always crying, always annoying, and their strengths kind of will blossom here and there, but they're always presented in very sexist lens. And then you have Miyazaki's film. Can you tell us a bit more about the role anime and maybe Ghibli plays in shifting that narrative?
So maybe 3 answers, if that's okay, or a 3-part answer.
Yes, please.
First, a lot of the young children in Miyazaki's films, particularly the girls, I think are based on Miyazaki. When Miyazaki was growing up, his mum was very ill with tuberculosis, I think. And so he and amongst his brothers and sisters were doing all of the housework. So I think he sees kind of what we would normally think of as women's domestic work as a way to do a kind of honest work that is about bettering your environment, bettering things for your family, your friends, the people around you. So we often see even the strongest female characters in Miyazaki's movies, Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, Chihiro from Spirited Away, doing cleaning. And initially, I was wrong about this. Initially, I thought that was, slightly regressive and maybe about gendered norms in Japanese society and what expectations were for women. But the more I've looked into it, the more I've come to realize it's about how he sees work in the round. And cleaning is something I think he sees as more as honest work, whereas running a company like Yubaba in Spirited Away is dishonest work. So I think there's a really nice anti-capitalistic narrative there, maybe. And certainly Miyazaki is a left-leaning filmmaker. He was part of the Toei Doga animation labor union when he was there in the 60s. He was the secretary for it at one point, I think. And Takahata was also high up in the union, as the Ghibli color designer Michio Yasuda. So all 3 of the main kind of artistic figures at Ghibli were all in the kind of left-leaning labor unions and talk about each other as nakama, which means close circle of friends, like insider friends group. And so there's a very kind of left-leaning answer to that question where women are equal to men in the movies. But Miyazaki's also talked, in the second part of my answer, has also talked about women, particularly young girls, as having less set expectations around their behavior and around their capacity. So it makes young women a more open audience or a more open set of heroes for an audience. So in Miyazaki's view, young girls are good heroines because they can do anything. And I think we see that in his female characters, whether it's putting up with suddenly being 90 years old or being a wolf riding princess or a witch who flies on a broom until she has a crisis of confidence and can't fly anymore. All of these characters could be male or could be female. The fact that they're women means that there's an acknowledgement of the possibility of women. And I think young girls in particular to become anything, which I really love in his work. And I suppose the third thing to note is my disappointment in Ghibli. because despite being the creators of such intensely feminist, wonderful films, and I do think these films are feminist in their leanings often, they have never promoted a woman to be a director of anything. Not even a commercial, not even a short at the Ghibli Museum. The closest has been Megumi Kagawa, who was the animation director on Porco Rosso, but also on The Day I Bought a Star, which is one of the 2006 shorts that Miyazaki directed for the Studio Ghibli Museum in Mitaka. But she's as close as they've come, as far as I know. They have had female producers. There was one, a lady called Eiko Tanaka, who worked as a producer at Ghibli during the time when they didn't have enough staff, when they were making My Neighbor Totoro and Grave the Fireflies at the same time. And she works for them on My Neighbor Totoro and then again on Kiki's Delivery Service, but is just slowly edged out. And I wouldn't feel sorry for her, though. She went on to found Studio 4C. So she's the woman behind things like Tekkon Kincrete, which is a fantastic animated movie. So there are these wonderful women behind the scenes, but none of them are given the freedom to be a director.
A fascinating answer, and the first part, I had never thought of it this way, but thinking what came to mind was the Howling Castle and how the wizard is doing these important things in the main world, like fomenting wars and fighting the kingdom and all these sort of things. But what makes him sane is somebody making this home a place where he can be himself. And it is his honest work. It's a fascinating insight into it. And as somebody who's consuming it rather than analyzing it the way you do it, I feel like often you have a few names of women that are quite famous as mangaka in the writing itself of the written medium. But in anime, often the big public names you hear will be men. And certainly when you see documentaries about Studio Ghibli or whatever, all you see in the room at all times is 100% men working on drawing.
Miyazaki's in the room, and then there's usually two women around him helping him do his job. Yeah.
Yes, so there's still a long way to go, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, recently we've started to see a few women directors rising up. I think the most prominent is Naoko Yamada, who was at Kyoto Animation or KyoAni and recently moved to Science Saru, which is Yuasa Masaaki's old studio. She's incredible, but she does this amazing direction where it's her and a composer, Ushio, I think his surname is, and a screenwriter. Koyamada's fantastic. She did a wonderful, wonderful anime series on retelling the story of the Heike. She did A Silent Voice back in 2014 or 2016. And she also did the K-On! Movie and Liz and the Bluebird. And then most recently did The Colors Within, Kimi no Iro. All of which are amazing films, most of which deal quite explicitly with disability as well. So for a woman director to become really popular in Japan and also be making films about disability is just phenomenal. And the way they work together is great because the soundtrack inspires the animation and the movement. The color schemes are insanely beautiful, but then the storytelling has real heart too. So these are not movies that are easy necessarily, but they are beautiful. And I think her ability now to start reaching bigger and bigger audiences is something we should all be very happy about because her work is great. And to get more diverse voices into anime is a wonderful thing.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And I guess we're slowly etching to the end. I have two final questions. One of them I would like to circle back into your own academic work around all these topics. And anybody who's looking at your bibliography will see that you've written about a very broad set of topics. You've written about merchandising and industry, about soundscape, fandoms, cultural influences. Is there an aspect of animation that is of particular interest to you, that is close to your heart?
Oh, so many. I like talking about the industrial side of anime. because in some ways I feel like when you look at how films are made, how anime TV shows are made, how they work, who's working on them, you get somehow closer to the truths they're trying to tell us. I enjoy that, but I also think it's important to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I've moved in this maybe slightly more industrial direction lately. I've written about a great deal of things across my career, mostly because when I first got into writing about anime, it was me and Susan Napier in academia. And happily now, we have a lot more diversity of voices. There's some great scholars working here in the UK, Shiro Yoshioka at Newcastle and Zoe Crombie at Lancaster are just wonderful human beings. And, people like Helen McCarthy and John, who's based here as well, are the foundations of anime studies. So I feel very lucky to be in this environment now where there is more coverage, so you don't have to do everything. But I have a special love in my heart for sound in anime because it's so diverse but so changeable as well, across genres, across different directors' styles of filmmaking. I mean, who would Makoto Shinkai be without Radwimps, the band? They give him a soundtrack every time he's making one of these amazing films of his. And so, Joe Hisaishi and Miyazaki, who would Miyazaki be without a Joe Hisaishi score? These are really important things to think about. And I do really enjoy talking about sound, but more and more lately, what I'm enjoying thinking about is the collaborations between filmmakers and the people they work with, because there's so much creativity that goes into these productions that, hundreds, if not thousands of people work on these movies. If you watch The Boy and the Heron, it's a who's who of anime studios. If you watch the end credit sequence, it's every company was working on that movie at one point or another in Japan. And so it's almost like a testament to the whole of the anime industry. But unless you bother to sit and watch the endless credit sequences, you don't see it. And a very good friend of mine, Stevie Suan, is working in Japan at the moment, and he's looking at outsourcing to Asia. So anime isn't even now just Japanese. It's also traveling to other parts of the world and influencing animation in South Korea, in China, and in other parts of Asia. So it'll probably happen at some point that we start to see anime becoming more of an Asian phenomenon. And I think that's a really exciting thing to look forward to as well. But that's, if we don't ruin it all with AI first. And that's probably the thing that's happened to Ghibli most recently that is most controversial.
That's bleak indeed.
Well, that Chat GPT Ghibli filter. I'm working on an article about it right now, and with a friend, and I'm trying to come to a conclusion about how I feel about it. And it's a story of two halves, isn't it? Like, on one side, who doesn't want to have pictures of themselves that look like Hayao Miyazaki drew them? But on the flip side of that coin is, if you can do that, it takes away what's special about those movies on one level. The uniqueness of the art style, the collaboration, all the work that went into those movies is part of how beautiful they are and how unique they are. And in using AI at the moment, what you do is you get a generic version of it, not the Ghibli version of it. And so I haven't used it, and I probably won't, but I understand the appeal. So I'm very much on the fence, and I'm sorry I can't make a decision about that. But I do worry about what AI might do to the animation industry in Japan, which is already seeing a brain drain away.
Not really decide yourself, you're on the fence.
I'm very much on the fence, yes. I understand the appeal, but I would not want to limit myself to a generic version of Ghibli. I think the real version of Ghibli, the one that is always different to the last one you watch, the one that is always unique, the version of Ghibli that is exciting is the one that comes from the collaborations at Ghibli, not from a computer pretending to be Ghibli. Maybe. Sorry.
No, thank you for
And if anyone out there has made their own Ghiblified photos, I have no judgment here.
Okay. Okay, with that, it's coming to the end, so it's now our traditional, very silly quickfire round. And I've got 3 Ghibli folk. So are you ready just for some silliness here?
Are we ever ready?
So, question number 1. We'll go with Rayna first. You're the guest and the
a
expert
quiz.
here.
Okay.
Which Ghibli character would have the most confusing skincare routine?
Ashtaka from
Okay.
Princess Mononoke.
Faunch?
I was going to go for Mononoke as well, but not Ashtaka. I was going to go with Otoko, the old Okoto, the old king of the boars.
The old, yeah.
Kieran?
I was thinking San, but then again, hers is just, 2 sort of fang marks underneath her eyes. Maybe the next person came. I mean, I think we're sticking with Mononoke here.
It is a Mononoke answer,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is maybe the monk.
Why am I blanking on his name?
Yeah, his name is getting blanked in me as well.
Oh, it'll come back to me in about 5 minutes. Carry on.
Yeah.
Alright. Number 2. If the cat bus drove for Uber, what would his rating be? If the cat bus drove for Uber, what would his rating be?
Kappa. Oh, yeah.
Is there something higher than 5? I mean, furry interior, no idea where he's going. Fantastic service, I'm sure.
Faunch?
I would say a good 5. Is there exactly when you need it to be?
Right, and
Yes,
Kieran?
true.
Which film is the Kappa from?
My Neighbor Totoro.
Okay, again, that's an iconic Ghibli film I've not really fully seen. So,
Right.
Did you know that that's the only film Miyazaki ever made a sequel to?
I did not.
Yeah. So May and the Kitten Bus is a film you can watch exclusively at the Studio Ghibli Museum in Mitaka and at the Ghibli Park occasionally.
Neat.
And it's about the little girl from it giving a caramel to a small kitten bus and then getting to go on an adventure.
That's exciting.
I'll go watch Totoro and then put in my answer at a later time in the comments.
Yes, we'll do a very obvious jump cut to your answer there. So, number 3, what's the one household chore Calcifier would absolutely refuse to do?
Cleaning the bath, for sure.
Faunch?
And that bath is disgusting in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, is there another answer than that? I don't think so.
Kieran, are you on board with that one?
I third that because as soon as you brought it up, it's like, yeah, water and fire don't really mix, and Calcifer just eats anything. So if it involves eating, that's out the window. If it involves his potential extinguishment,
Yeah. Okay, and number 4, how many acorns does Totoro actually have stored to the nearest ton? This is your
That's a
guess.
really-
What do you think?
It's a really big camphor tree he lives in. Infinite amounts. It's got to be tons, right? It's got to be tons. So
There's no right or
I'll
wrong
go
answer.
for 10,000 tons because in Japanese that's ichiman, which would be also one of the things you say in Japan for just like infinite.
I have to pick another answer. I'll go lower. I'll go 5,000 tons.
And Kieran?
75,000, just nice in between.
It's like the prior, lower.
All right. Number 5, what terrible pop song do you think Princess Mononoke secretly listens to while sharpening her knife?
God.
I want to get in trouble. I want to start a fight.
Oh, you get it. You get Faunch singing now. Yes.
Oh, I like that. That's perfect.
Yeah,
Kieran,
I think
can you top that?
I think she
Are you
would be
gonna
a
sing
pink
it?
girl. I don't know why. I don't know if she'd enjoy this, but it might. Maybe this is the reason why it might catch us off guard. Maybe Golden from K-pop.
I like that as well.
I cannot escape that
This is
song.
terrible. No, nobody can. It's everywhere. I have nieces.
I have a white.
Right. If the Kodama had a band, what would their genre be?
I kind of want to say drum and bass.
All right.
Don't know
Faunch,
why.
it'd be extra points if you start singing again.
I don't have one for that. No, I'll have to pass that one.
All right. Kieran.
So Kotama, were they not the dust spirits from Spirited Away?
No,
They're
the
the
tree
Kodama.
spirit.
They're the tree spirits that
Oh, the
click
tree
their head
spirit.
in
Okay, yeah,
Princess-
okay.
Princess Mononoke.
Right. Yes, that's right.
So it's got to be something with rhythm, right? It's gotta be
Rhythm
something with drums.
or heavy metal because of the headbanging.
Mm, that would
Speaking
work.
from experience.
I mean, they could be
And,
Korpi Clani, right? Clan of the Forest.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
yeah. Okay. This is going back to an earlier question. Which Ghibli food looks the best? Would probably taste awful in real life.
It's a nice little twist on that.
In Spirited
Quickly
Away,
revising all the food. Come back to me.
in Spirited Away,
Oh
that
yeah,
little
maybe some of
bowl
the
that he eats,
that
it looks like so
Yeah,
tasty,
The whole thing. Yeah.
and then it makes him like vomit his own interiors.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The little gecko
Yeah.
that is given to Sen to eat in the bathhouse. Yeah, I'm not no.
No. Here, have a gecko.
Yeah.
I think for me, it probably the lobster or the crab. Like we were discussing before, the animation makes it look really awesome. It looks delicious. I'm not a fan of lobster or crab, so I probably
Yeah.
would hate it.
Okay. What's the floating city of Laputa's Wi-Fi password?
What's that word they say at the end? The word that triggers the destruction of the city. Sorry, spoiler alert.
Probably shouldn't be that, right? Then anytime you ask about the password, somebody blows up the city. I come back to me. I'm not sure.
Okay, Kieran, do you have a...
A character's mother's maiden name?
I mean,
Okay.
given the only inhabitant in the past hundreds of years was this robot, it would probably be something like ding, and then like
Yeah.
66 or something like that.
So
I'm
yeah,
trying
that
to
would-
think because it looks like you remember those old like 70s rock album covers with like the floating castles in the sky. Like I wonder if there's like the artist of one of those we could name.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm failing on the art side of things. Sorry.
So the last of the quickfire questions: which character would be the most annoying to be stuck in a slow-moving lift with? Which Ghibli character would be worst to be stuck in a lift with?
I've got one.
Go for it.
Go for it, Kieran.
Muta from Cat Returns.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Especially if
Yeah,
he's
Muta.
voiced by
I would probably go Calcifer. He's very needy.
yeah.
He is
that makes
very
sense.
needy.
Faunch, you put the last say on this one.
Yeah, which one was I thinking about? It's not exactly annoying, but the faceless from Chihiro, like you're there. It's very slow.
No face.
No
Yeah.
face.
No face. Sorry, I have all of them in French subtitles. I can imagine him
yeah.
standing behind me the entire ride and just wanting for the doors.
Oh,
to
he's just
open.
going.
Yeah. Love it.
Well, that's the end of that silly. This is not a silly question. Would you ever consider coming up to the Hebrides if you wanted to make an appearance here? Would you like to visit
I would
us?
love to. Yes, I would definitely consider it. I just have to
Right.
get time off work to come up. That's all.
Well, we'll watch this space. You never know
So
what might happen.
possible
And
Ocon guest then.
yes, I'm
Sure.
always fishing for that with everyone. Everyone we get on.
Yeah,
If people
the further
want-
north, the better. Really.
Well, the north is the best.
There's only one convention further north than us, so we're quite far.
Wow.
We're the furthest west, so we've got that claim to us. So, and if people want to reach out to you, Rayna, they've got questions or anything like that, where can they find you?
Be delighted if they did. I'm at the University of Bristol, obviously, so can reach me there by email. And I'm on Instagram and some of the other socials. I'm usually Rayna D on those because I joined so early. I got the one letter name. Yeah.
You're the OG.
So yeah, the OG. But yeah, do reach out. I'd love to hear from everyone.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for turning out. Our next show is on Thursday with Ivo Krawanski, and we're talking about the Polish Netflix medieval comedy series 1670, which will be very interesting as well. A bit of a change of topic, but
Yeah.
all good stuff. And thank you, everyone, for coming in. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Sayonara.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
And if you